Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. I am so glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, through the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all, or if you're watching this show on our many social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300. We have no uses for ease at the beginning of extra if you're looking for us. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way in about 19 minutes. It's a weird number to be about. You will hear my conversation with Jonas Fieldberg of the Switchbacks. He had himself quite the evening last night as the Switchbacks got a big win over Memphis. If you would like to be my guest at any other time, the number to either call or text is the same for your convenience, 719-247-1313. Keep that number handy as well, because that's how you win stuff from me, and I have stuff for you to win today. Don't know why my notes are all the way over here. Let's start, shall we? For a program that has as many zealous detractors, shall we say, ready to pounce as Colorado does, there may not be a worse game than this one tonight against North Dakota State. This is not the kind of game that you schedule. There is a reason why North Dakota State very rarely these days gets opportunities like this. 2 years ago, they played Arizona and they scared them to death. Arizona needed a touchdown with less than 5 minutes to go to beat North Dakota State. And they're not even the North Dakota State, to paraphrase Rick Pitino or turn a phrase from Rick Pitino. Carson Wentz and Trey Lance aren't walking through that door. They're not that team anymore. But yet, they go into Tucson and nearly pull off a win against a Power 5 team. They still have that capability. They're one of the best teams at the FCS level. And they have something that CU does not, and something that I think plays a major role in some of the early season upsets that we see in college football every year, to say nothing of the last couple with the transfer portal. North Dakota State has continuity. Their quarterback, Cam Miller, took over for Trey Lance 3 years ago. 3 of their top 4 running backs they have. Their top 3 sack getters. They will not have their leading tackler from last year, Cole Wisniewski. He's kind of their last line of defense at the safety position. But the next 4 leading tacklers from last year's North Dakota State team are playing tonight in Boulder. This is not the team that you want to play against when you have brought in 42 guys through the transfer portal. And Deion Sanders is definitely aware of who North Dakota State is.
17 national championships, including 9 since 2011, 37 conference championships. So this team will be well prepared. They will be disciplined, and they will come to play.
This is the polar opposite of last year's opener for CU. Dion talked about hope turning into expectation last week. Well, this is the embodiment of that. The feeling around the TCU game was curious, right? Morbid curiosity would be, I think, the way how many people were approaching that game. You just wanted to see it. What does this look like? And I think a lot of talk around here was just make it a good game. Just have a good showing against the runners up from the national title game the year before. Just play well. Have a good showing. Tonight could not be further from that. The curiosity is still there. Maybe not to the degree it was a year ago, but it's still there. Again, 42 guys through the transfer portal. The offensive and defensive line specifically, how do they look? But it's not just put on a good showing. Just be competitive. First and foremost, they must win. They must win. I hesitate to put that on a week 1 game, but it's a must win. Because of everything that has happened, not just over the last, couple of weeks. It certainly has boiled over the last couple of weeks, but just think about the news cycle regarding the Colorado Buffaloes since last season ended. It hasn't been overwhelmingly positive. And there are a lot of people just sitting there sharpening their knives and even eking out a win tonight is enough ammunition for some of those people. This is hope turning expectation. There's no hope about this game. There's expectation. You take care of business and you look good doing it. Because while North Dakota State has a reputation, is an elite FCS team, it's still Power 4 against FCS. It's a very visible program taking on an FCS school. The Buffaloes, I think in a lot of people's minds, are punching below their weight, punching down. But that's not the case. But that doesn't matter. Perception is reality. In year 1, under Deion Sanders, I think there was a consistent theme of the more expectation that was put on this team, the worse it would be. Right? I mean, think about it. The more hype that was around this team, the worse it got. Through the non-conference, everybody loved CU. Loved them. And then what happened? They collapsed. They were much better last year when there were no expectations. TCU, USC. Late in the year, they had some close games where I thought they played pretty well. But think about CSU. Double overtime against Little Brother at home. The Stanford game. So this is a team that going into year 2 needs to do better with that expectation. Needs to not just win the games you think they'll win, but win them convincingly because of all the other stuff that's going on. And CU has brought it on themselves, right? With what the news cycle has been over the last week. What Shador said about every team viewing this as their Super Bowl. Like, they bring it on themselves. And they do so successfully. And I can't help but think about the timing of this Sean Keeler stuff. Sanders was able last year to play the us versus them, us against the world angle so well. Right? Played it to a T. It fit him perfectly. This game was shaping up to not really have that. And then Friday's news. That's why I keep going back to I gotta believe the action itself was intentional, and the timing, the more I think about it, feels intentional. To get everybody worked into a tizzy, especially the people who criticize Deion Sanders, who criticize this program, who don't believe that this program is going to do much this year. I think at some level, some part of this was about circling the wagons and making Deion's job in getting this team focused and ready for tonight a little bit easier. Because while North Dakota State is not the ideal week 1 opponent for a team like CU, I don't think that CU is overlooking them. I don't. I think that they are focused. I think they are focused on this one, and I gotta believe that the story of the past week has helped them do that. They know what's at stake. They know what tomorrow will be like if they don't take care of business in this game. But it won't be easy. I don't think CU blows this team out. I don't. I think tonight has to be Shador. Jumpstart the Heisman campaign tonight. Like the TCU game, like the opener last year. Shador's not new. Like the guys in front of him and the guys on the defensive line and some of the guys at the skill positions. I think tonight you look to Shador Sanders to help lead you. And I think he has to have a really good game in order for CU to win this game. North Dakota State is going to keep it close. They're going to run the football. They're going to try to keep Shador off the field. But when Shador's out there, he's got to make plays. He's got to lead this team to a win tonight. Because if they lose, you might as well just like unplug the cable in every home in Boulder. Because tomorrow's going to be unbearable if you're a CU fan or somebody involved with the program. They have to win tonight. Now, if it's a game like I predict it's going to be, then I think you're getting mixed reviews. The detractors will still be there. They probably won't be quite as boisterous, but they'll be there. Winning, as long as it's not, double overtime, like the CSU game, if they win by a touchdown, if you don't ever really feel like they're in danger, they kind of keep North Dakota State at bay, even though the Bison are keeping the score close. I think that could be an okay result. But losing a game like this, especially with the backdrop that I set up, that I think part of the Sean Keeler stuff is about circling those wagons. Deion Sanders, after they beat TCU, would go around asking every media member in that room after the game, do you believe? If with all of the buildup to this game and the stakes of this game, if his team doesn't rise to the occasion, if his team doesn't win this game, he can ask the same question, but he's got to ask it in a different tone, wondering legitimately who believes. It's okay to win close, but you got to win. Give North Dakota State their just due. It's a good football team who I think will have the right game plan. Losing's not an option tonight. If they lose tonight, we're going to see Deion's going to have to shut down a few more media members. 719-247-1313. Your predictions for tonight's game. It's last time I checked, CU minus 10.5. I think I would take North Dakota State. Over under is 55.5. No value in taking the Buffs tonight, but taking North Dakota State to cover the 10.5 feels like there's value there. Get your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, you'll hear my conversation with not just a goal-scoring hero. How about a multiple goal-scoring hero for the Colorado Springs Switchbacks and a wild one last night? Jonas Fjellberg. You're listening to Extra Sports 1300. This Saturday afternoon, the Air Force Falcons kick off their 2024 season as they host Merrimack. Kickoff is at 1:30. It's a new experience for game day at Thin Air. Get your tickets, aftickets.com. ESPN has ran the numbers, talked to their AI robot or whatever it is that they do, and they have spit out the rookie season numbers for Bo Nix. 3,155 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. They also say he's going to fumble the ball 4 times, run for a little less than 200 yards, and have a couple of rushing touchdowns. Now, if you're wondering where that would put him, 3,155 in passing yards would have ranked 18th in the NFL last year, just below Gardner Minshew and right above Justin Herbert, who didn't play half the season or a quarter of the season, and Russell Wilson. His 17 passing touchdowns would rank him 20th this year in the NFL. That would be just below Kirk Cousins, who only played half a season, and right above Justin Fields. Now, the 13 interceptions would put him just outside the top 5. That's the number that sticks out to me. Because 13 interceptions would put him above Goff, Ritter, Mac Jones, Stafford, Love, Purdy, and it would put him in a group with Lawrence, Tua, and Mahomes, who all had 14 last year, but also threw for, in a couple of those players' cases, many more touchdowns, many more yards. But what this paints a picture of is a rookie quarterback that Sean Payton is not going to ask too terribly much of, but will be forced to with the Broncos playing from behind. That's where I see a lot of these interceptions. If he's going to have 13 interceptions, the Broncos need to be trailing in quite a few games. That's the number, again, that sticks out to me, because if he's only throwing 17 touchdowns, if he throws 13 interceptions, that's not a good year. That's not a good jumping off point for the rest of Bo Nix's career. That's the number I look at, and it can't be that high. But that would indicate that the Broncos are trailing, or at least in a lot of 3rd and longs. And I think this team has the chance to not be in those situations as much this year. So the 13 interceptions is what I look at and go, yeah, I think that's probably a bit aggressive. But the other ones, I could see it. His over-under right now for passing touchdowns in Vegas is 18.5, with the over being on the plus side of things. So the yards and the touchdowns, I could see him being in that range. The interceptions seem too high. And certainly that would put him below the numbers that Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are going to put up. Which, look, I don't think that's wrong, if for no other reason than the fact that the Bears and the Commanders are going to ask much more of Bo Nix this year. When I went to the Switchbacks game, I was asked on my way in, like, why do people care so much about what Russell Wilson is doing now? And I get it's a fair question, right? Because the normal line of thinking is he's not Bronco anymore. He's not even in the division. I know he's on the schedule, but shouldn't it just be, it's dead cap? Shouldn't Russell Wilson kind of be dead to Broncos fans? Why do they spend so much time? Well, part of it is week 2, right? But I think there will be people in their own heads. I think there will be people on television and radio that are going to put up a side-by-side, Bo Nix to Russell Wilson. Is this better? Right? Because you and I can agree that there was no way that if Sean Payton was done with Russell Wilson, that he could hang on for another year. They got to get going on this. But some people will be like, why didn't you just keep Russell Wilson? Right? Bring along a rookie quarterback slowly, like the Patriots are doing with Drake May, as they have announced Jacoby Brissett is going to be their starter, which I think is the right call. But I got to imagine it's a little hard to stomach if you're a Patriots fan, given that Gerard Mayo said that Drake May was playing better than Jacoby Brissett. But this is about the New England roster. And a quarterback that, even if he's outplayed Jacoby Brissett, is still probably the longest-term project of any of the rookie quarterbacks that were taken in the first round. But you know that there was no path forward. And you know the contractual language that was in there. This was the Broncos out, and they took it. But there will be that comparison. Are the Broncos better off at quarterback? And if the numbers or the way it looks says yes, then I think that leads, and I think that's kind of built in. I think that's cooked in a little bit. I think a lot of people assume that's going to be the case. And that's where they are saying, well, if the Broncos did this with Russell Wilson and Bo Nix performs better, why can't the Broncos match or exceed their win total? Get a little bit into that after the top of the hour. But I think there will be that comparison. Even if, to be honest, it really doesn't matter. Because you know it's going to look better. And you know that, more importantly, that Sean Payton thinks that Bo Nix fits what he does and Russell Wilson does not. That's kind of the only piece of information you need to know. But it's natural to kind of, see what the X is up to. Drive by their house, maybe. Not like every night, but just like once. Maybe you're on your anniversary. See what they're up to. Maybe some light social media stalking. Like, I'm not saying that I've done any of this stuff, because I haven't and I never would, because I am that confident as a man. It's their loss. By the way, it's none of your business where I was last night after the Switchbacks game, what neighborhood I was in, whose house I was driving by. That's not any of your concern. But it's natural to look at the predecessor and see if the Broncos are going to be better. But Sean Payton said it. Dump the puzzle pieces out. Put it all back together. And it's going to be the same way with Bo Nix. 31-55 passing yards, 17 passing TDs, 13 interceptions. Yeah, that interception number sticks out. If he's only throwing 17 touchdowns, he's probably got to get under what? Be at 10, under 10. And that's me believing in Bo Nix to a degree. That's me giving him credit. And I know one of his biggest flaws is he gets a little too panicky. But I think if those are his other numbers, the 13 interceptions is a little bit high. Take your thoughts on it. 719-24-7. 1313. Let's take a couple of texts. Jason says, longtime listener and even longer time Switchbacks fan. When my family and I can't make it to a match, we tune in on ESPN Plus, but honestly, we're not big fans of the match commentary, so we've made it a tradition to mute the sound and listen to you and Roland instead. You both never disappoint, always entertaining and on point. With that said, you guys absolutely nailed it last night. Vailbird's back-to-back goals were spectacular, but your commentary was pure gold. You almost topped your iconic, you beautiful man, you call from a couple of seasons ago. Well done. Oh, I appreciate that, Jason. And you don't know how much that means to me, because last night was a bit of, we were from a technical standpoint on the struggle bus. So I'm glad that the product did not suffer too terribly much. But I just said that I'm confident in myself as a person. So strike what I said. But no, that does mean a lot. Thank you. And we appreciate that you do that, because it's an extra step, and you taking that extra step certainly, and I can speak for Roland on this, means a lot. Hope to be talking to you on Sunday. Speaking of ESPN Plus, I will be the ESPN Plus commentary tonight for Air Force men's soccer. They're taking on Army. How's that for a home opener? Air Force Army. Jeff Bennett's going to be alongside for that one. Love working with Jeff. We'll have that one for you tonight at 6 o'clock if you are so inclined. No need to mute and bring up a different feed. Be Jeff and I. Or maybe that's all the more reason to mute. Got an upset special here. I was talking about North Dakota State and CU. From the 910, Western Carolina over NC State. And I got to tell you, I didn't have that game on my radar, so I went and looked. The line is North Carolina State minus 31.5, and you're calling an upset. Not even a cover. That's bold. Hey, it's week 1. Let's get carried away. You have all season to make up for your losses. 719-24-7. 1313. Coming up next, you can call this Broncos season a lot of things. Please do not call it one thing, or else Alex Singleton will be very upset. I'll tell you what that is next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome. Drive Time Sports on this Thursday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Shouts to those of you watching the show today on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. The handle is all the same, at XTRA Sports 1300. I have in my hand, metaphorically, actually, no, not metaphorically. When it comes to ludicrous tickets, literally in my hand. Air Force tickets are metaphorically in my hand, but I have both to give away this hour. The number you're going to want to have for your chance to win, 719-247-1313. I'm beginning to find out that there is a word that is viewed as a 4-letter word around the Denver Broncos, even though it actually has 7 letters. Thank goodness I had enough fingers to count. It's rebuild. They don't like that word. You are not to utter that word around the Denver Broncos. Not in a you shouldn't say this around Deion Sanders kind of way, but because you'll be met with, I would say, light indignation. Here's Alex Singleton on the idea that this is a rebuild.
No, we got to win football games. No, we're trying to win. Trying to win now. I think that, I mean, if a player or a coach or anyone stood up here and told you they're rebuilding, they'd probably be full of shit. That would suck. I'm 30. I would be very disappointed.
It's part of the reason why we rebuild is such a dirty word around any sports organization, for the very reason that Alex Singleton highlighted there. People conflate rebuild with tanking. Tanking is an extreme form of rebuilding. But rebuilding doesn't have to mean you're not trying to win games. The Broncos are absolutely trying to win football games. This isn't, teams don't really tank in the NFL. There are exceptions to every rule, but teams don't really tank. It's just a different dynamic than the NBA, where tanking is more prevalent. And when you think of tanking, you think of the NBA. Well, it's because the prize to the team that tanks is greater than necessarily the prize to an NFL team that tanks. Which I know sounds counterintuitive, because if you're the worst team, you get the number 1 pick. And that's not the case in the NBA. But it's more about how one player can change the fortunes of a franchise. Now, quarterbacks are the closest thing to that in the NFL, but still, look at Jacksonville. Perfect example. Did they tank the year before they got Trevor Lawrence? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But they got Trevor Lawrence. What have they done since? One terrible year, one good year, and then a regression. That's been Trevor Lawrence. Success hasn't immediately followed. Big time success hasn't even happened yet for Jacksonville. So it's different. And I think it also goes into mentality. Like if you're rebuilding, you're automatically tanking, that idea that Alex Singleton brought up. Like there's just this feeling of you don't do it. You don't tank. But rebuilding, and I know someone in the trenches doesn't want to hear it, but rebuilding can be a very positive thing for a franchise, especially one like the Denver Broncos. that have had so many years where they've tried to, you know, assemble the plane midair and it hasn't worked. This is a rebuild. This has all the telltale signs of a rebuild, as much as Alex Singleton doesn't want to hear it. What would you call a team that continues over the last couple of years to inch closer to being one of the youngest in the National Football League, does not bring in a single one of the top 100 NFL free agents this offseason? Not one. Meanwhile, lets multiple players go that have been staples of their team for the last couple of years. Justin Simmons, Russell Wilson, Lloyd Cushenberry, Jerry Jeudy, Josie Jewell. And the fact that a couple of those names will make you go, wait a minute, is kind of makes my point that this is necessary. Sean Payton has swapped out over 70% of the starters that Nathaniel Hackett trotted out there against Seattle 2 years ago. He's turned over nearly 70% of the entire roster. What do you call that? While not adding any impact players via free agency or trade this year. Now, they got McGlinchey and they got Powers, but that was a non-negotiable for Sean Payton. He had to improve the offensive line, and the opportunity presented itself. But this year, Josh Reynolds, Malcolm Roach, Brandon Jones, these are not impact free agent signings. And at a couple of those positions, you can even argue that the Broncos on paper are not as good going into this year as they were this time last year. They're rebuilding, emphasizing the draft, starting a rookie quarterback. They're rebuilding, whether Alex Singleton wants to admit it or not. But it doesn't mean that the Broncos aren't trying to win. They are. It's just, while that rebuild happens, how much winning can conceivably be done? Here's Sean Payton on his prediction for the upcoming season, or lack thereof.
I'm never one to make predictions at the start of the season. I think it's playing well early. I talked about that. What does that mean? Just we can't get off to the start we did a year ago and dig ourselves in a hole.
And Deion Sanders did this the other day too, when he was asked about the expectation. You'd be a fool to put a number on it. Right? Even though Sean Payton has as much job security as any coach in the NFL, you don't do that. You don't call your shot. Because, you suffer a rash of injuries. Another Houston Texans pop up on your schedule. All of a sudden, this team that comes out of nowhere that you miscalculated, and now they're really good, and you thought that was a win. It does no good to affix a projected win total if you're a head coach. Because all that will happen is people will say, remember when Sean Payton said the Broncos would win 9 games? Well, they won 6. They won 7. Even they won 8. They fell short. Seasons of failure. Let's talk about it. Is Bo Nix the guy? Should they draft Shedeur Sanders? He knows the media well enough. He knows fan bases well enough. It serves no purpose to put a number on it. But I do like that he keeps going back to the beginning part of the schedule because it's more predictable. Still, don't put a number on it Don't say we're going to win 2 of our first 4, or 3 of our first 4. You don't do that. But the importance of it, because it is a little bit more predictable, right? You would expect Seattle, Pittsburgh, Tampa, and the Jets, and knowing full well what happened to the Jets at the beginning of last year, but in a normal circumstance, you expect those teams to be close to 100%, right? The wear and tear, the war of attrition hasn't really kicked in yet 4 weeks down the road. And he's right about what last year's start did to them. And I keep bringing this up. If not for a 12th Buffalo Bill, the Pastronaut, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Easton Stick, Broncos would be like a 5-win team. They got some big-time breaks along the way. And if you're a Broncos fan, you're saying, well, with Kareem Jackson, what he did the first 2 weeks of the season, we deserve some breaks. And yeah, a lot of this comes out in the wash, but the point is that start should have buried this team. And the circumstances around them playing into the periphery of the playoff conversation going into that New England game, they were incredibly fortunate. There should have been multiple losses in that stretch. Think about if Cleveland found Joe Flacco against Denver, or if Kirk Cousins was healthy, or if the Buffalo Bills could count properly to 11. The start of the season was where the Broncos could have made some hay based on the schedule, right? Raiders at home, Commanders at home. They did beat Chicago. You knew Miami was going to be a loss, but it was fairly reasonable. It wouldn't be crazy for you to think they would get off to a 3-1 start. 2-2 probably feels more right. And certainly you don't expect them to lose 70-20. But that start really took them out of it. I mean, as they were going through the winning streak, they started to creep back in and some people bought into it. But it was a long shot, right? I mean, last year, 10 was the number of wins you had to get in. And there was like 4 teams who had 9. Broncos weren't that close. But the first 4 games this year are going to be extremely important if the Broncos are going to do a fair amount of winning. The problem is this first 4-game stretch does not look as favorable as last year's. And that's the opportunity the Broncos whiffed on last year. They had a chance to build up a pretty good start, and they squandered it. This year, it doesn't look like a good start is in the offing. Last year, it's 2, maybe 3 wins. This year, you look at those first 4 games and you say 1, maybe 2 wins. But I feel like if the Broncos are going to, and mind you, I'm not in the camp of the Broncos being in the playoff conversation. So I'm not talking about this in terms of the Broncos making the postseason. To make the postseason, they probably have to go unbeaten at home, get a win against every AFC West team, and they probably have to start with no fewer than 2 wins out of these first 4 games. Those are probably the 3 things they absolutely have to do to have a shot at the playoffs. I'll let you decide how feasible those 3 things are. They need all 3. They need to check every one of those boxes. But just in terms of the Broncos doing some winning along the way, right? I feel like so much of this season is about Bo Nix, obviously. That's the most important thing. How is Bo Nix coming along? And we make the mistake of affixing wins and losses to quarterbacks. I don't want to do that with Bo Nix. Unless he throws a critical interception and costs the Broncos the game, the win-loss total of the Denver Broncos does not need to be pinned on Bo Nix. But it's because the Broncos are rebuilding. It's about the rookie class. It's about Bo Nix. It's about these young players who are looking to take a step in their second year, like Marvin Mims, like Jaleel McLaughlin, the progress that they're making. So when 2025, 2026 rolls around, now we can legitimately talk about the Broncos and the playoffs, if all goes well. But if the Broncos are going to have a decent season where you're feeling good about the team, you know, outside of the performance of Bo Nix, if you need some wins along the way, to me, the non-negotiables for the Denver Broncos, they must end their losing streak to the Raiders. They must. They cannot get swept by Vegas. Have to win one of those two games. You got to beat Carolina. That's the one team on the schedule that I look at and I say, I know for a fact the Denver Broncos are better than Carolina. No Brian Burns, no Christian McCaffrey, no DJ Moore. Bryce Young looked completely lost. Maybe Dave Canales is a step in the right direction, but not night and day different from last year. Got to beat Carolina. Can't lose that game. Can't get swept by the Raiders. And I kind of feel like you need two of these first four. A 1-3 start with, you know, all your divisional games, with Baltimore and some of these other teams that are weighting them down the line. A 1-3 start, no, forget an 0-4 start. 0-4 start is the sky is falling. Bench Bo Nix. Where's Russell Wilson? Can we get Dion to pull a Manning and get Shador in Denver? Like, the sky would be falling if the Broncos start 0-4. I feel like they need two. And while I wouldn't expect them to win two, if you split with Seattle and Tampa and you beat Pittsburgh, which is another non-negotiable, you got to win that game. Right? Last year, a game like that was the Jets game, and they lost it. And it had an impact. Right? That was a bad loss for the Denver Broncos. Losing to Pittsburgh would be a bad loss. So I'm looking at Pittsburgh as the one that I think the Broncos win. And if you could split with Seattle and Tampa, who are decent teams, who on paper are better than Denver, they are road games, but they're not Kansas City, they're not Buffalo. Neither one of those teams is a legitimate threat in the NFC. If you could split with those two teams, you can get that done. I think the non-negotiables for the Broncos this year are actually doable. Carolina, Raiders, Steelers, and then you split with Seattle and Tampa. If you can check those boxes, I think those are the right games to keep the good feelings going with the Denver Broncos. And then you got to figure out a way to navigate the back end of the season. And that's where health and other things come into play. If one of those games looks different by week 10 than it does right now. But this is a rebuild. And when you're rebuilding, you're still trying to win, but you're not going to win as much. And it shouldn't be about winning as much. And I'm talking to Broncos fans, not Alex Singleton. Right? His point of I'm 30. Yeah, for the NFL, 30 is 40. That's what makes Tom Brady playing essentially into his 70s so impressive. Yeah, the guys don't want to hear this. The guys are all in. The guys want to win as many games as they can. But they're a little close to the situation. This is a rebuild. But rebuilds are necessary, and rebuilds can be positive. You can feel good about a rebuild through the first year. How many wins do the Broncos need to get, or what wins do they need to get to keep, I'm going to say stringing along? That has a negative connotation, but you know it's about Bo Nix. You're smart enough to know more than anything else, it's about Bo Nix and how he looks. But you like some wins along the way. You want the right wins. You want a certain number of wins. What is that? What does that look like for you? 719-24/7 1313. Your chance to win tickets to see Ludacris Saturday night at the Colorado State Fair is next. Want to see Ludacris at the Southwest Motors Event Center this Saturday night, part of the Colorado State Fair concert lineup? Well, I have your chance right now. 13th texter to text Ludacris to 719-247-1313 will win a pair of tickets to see Luda with Mike Jones. Who? Mike Jones. At the Southwest Motors Event Center this Saturday night. And probably be good to also like plan a whole day there. The Colorado State Fair. ColoradoStateFair.com. Don't want to just go down there for the concert. Go down a little bit early. Eat some of that amazing fair food. Maybe go to the carnival. Heck, you know what? I'll throw in a couple of carnival passes with the Ludacris tickets. I'm feeling quite benevolent today. I'll throw them in just to give you more of a incentive to get down there as early as possible and make it a full day Saturday in Pueblo. The Broncos today broke ground on their new training facility, and it's going to be awesome. I have no doubt it's going to be all these, these rich guys, they just try to one up each other. And Greg Penner even said today, as they were doing the groundbreaking ceremony, that they toured some of the other practice facilities. He said, like some things, didn't like other things. So, it's going to be great. And what it does for the Denver Broncos is probably what it does for you and me when we come into our work. If our bosses, put in a ping pong table in the break room, you're like, yeah, I'm in a better mood. And look, they're going to do some, sports science-y things. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great facility. I have no doubt it will open in 2026. And then the next project will be getting a new stadium, which Greg Penner was non-committal on, but I think is inevitable for a lot of different reasons. Hosting a certain football game, other events. Let's be honest, not a lot of places to build out there like Kroenke has around his arena. And probably better part of the city. They moved out to the Stapleton area or whatever. I think it's going to get done. I think they're going to build a new stadium. But we'll see. Right now, it's the new team headquarters, practice facility, all that kind of stuff. Greg Penner also said something that I think should have heartened Broncos fans, especially given the last young quarterback they tried to put an end to their search for a franchise quarterback. Greg Penner said today that he reached out to Bo Nix when he was named the starter. And one of the things that he talked to Bo Nix about was his understanding of how a rookie will go through some rough patches. And letting him know that they're committed to him through some of the rough patches. Like, look, there's a point where you can't be anymore. But to have an owner who understands that, to have a coach that's not going to be on the hot seat, I think in the next 2 or 3 years, it's more likely that Sean Payton just bails on the Broncos than Sean Payton gets fired. And these things weren't all in place when the Broncos were trying to develop Drew Lock. Right? There was the ownership situation was unsettled, let alone having somebody that gets it in terms of the patience you have to have with a rookie quarterback and not going to be the guy that dials the bat phone to the coach and says, you got to replace this guy. And then coupling that with a coach that has job security. The whole decision to choose Teddy Bridgewater over Drew Lock was based on Vic Fangio's job security. Like, we know that, right? Not that I think that Drew Lock would have, soared that year, but the decision, and I said it all the way through training camp, the decision was always going to be Teddy Bridgewater because Vic Fangio, in a year where he could be fired, and guess what happened? Cannot take time to help bring along Drew Lock. And Teddy Bridgewater was the veteran. Teddy Bridgewater had the smaller range of outcomes. He could trust him more. Therefore, he thought he could win more games with Teddy Bridgewater. The synergy between owner, GM, head coach, quarterback in the NFL, it's important. Everybody's in lockstep. I don't know what George Payton's future holds, but I don't think that there's too many meetings where George Payton is challenging Sean Payton. I'll just say that. I don't think there's a lot of discord going on between those two. So it does seem like this is at every point of the organizational flowchart, they're in lockstep about Bo Nix, and they're going to build around Bo Nix. This is a rebuild, and they're going to do it around Bo Nix. And I think that's good. Because and if you are a fan of a functional NFL franchise, you may think that I'm making too much of this, but you don't understand. Right? If I just relied on my fandom, I would look at it and be like, well, of course they should all be in lockstep because Brett Veach, Andy Reid, Clark Hunt, Patrick Mahomes, they're all in alignment. It's easy for that organization to be all in alignment. They have Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback. If you're a fan of a team that is not quite that settled, you understand what I'm talking about. Dallas. It's not a good thing. And it's not, necessarily a bona fide, tried and true path. Like, you still need talent to win. Right? The fact that the Broncos organization is aligned does not mean they're going to go to the playoffs because they got to beat teams that are better than them. But to me, it kind of starts there. It's got to start there where everybody's on the same page about what direction they're heading. And the Broncos haven't been that way. Right? They haven't even really had an owner for a while. And the fact that Greg Penner is willing to write massive checks without the strings attached that occurs in, again, I'm going to bring it up, but they're not the only team, Dallas. It's a good thing to have. It's a good starting point. So I thought that was noteworthy. Did I expect Greg Penner to say anything else? No, but I believe him. I mean, if nothing else, the guy has kind of proven that he backs up what he says. Seven 24/7 1313. Take a break, come back, and have a little bit more drive time sports before I head up to the Air Force Academy. And speaking of Air Force, your chance to win Air Force football tickets for Saturday coming up after this break. 24 football season on Saturday against Merrimack, and I would love to be able to send you out to Falcon Stadium, the newly revamped Falcon Stadium, the new East Club, which these tickets are not for, just as an aside, but still, the stadium looks really different, but in a really good way. And then some upgrades to their food menu and stuff. It's a new experience this year at Falcon Stadium, and you can be one of the first ones to experience it. Be the 13th texter to text Falcons in your name to 719-247-1313, and I'll hook you up with 4 tickets to see Air Force take on Merrimack. We'll have more on that matchup tomorrow on the show. Talk a little CSU Rams because they're playing a little school you may have heard of that's located in Austin, Texas. But tonight is about the Colorado Buffaloes. And for me, because I'm in this weird place where I'm not asking the world from Deion Sanders in year 2, and I'm also not predicting him to, go up in flames. I'm in this weird thing called the middle ground that doesn't exist when it comes to Deion Sanders. I look at this game like that. Do the Buffs have to blow out North Dakota State? No, let's give a little credit to North Dakota State, who's a national championship contender at the FCS level. And let's not act like CU is Georgia or Alabama or one of these other schools that are going to be vying for the college football national title. Okay? It's a tricky game. And Deion Sanders knows it because he's made mention of it multiple times, sarcastically thanking Rick George for scheduling this game. So let's give North Dakota State some flowers. They have to win. No doubt about it. They absolutely have to win. But they don't have to blow out North Dakota State. And we'll see what they do tonight at 6:00. Several very interesting college football matchups for week 1. And if week 0 is any indication, this is going to be pandemonium. Georgia, Clemson. I like Clemson a lot. I didn't need Florida State to lose to Georgia Tech to fade the Seminoles. I already was doing that. I have seen DJ Uiagalelei in multiple stops now to know he's not that guy. And everyone was talking about the defensive line of Florida State supposed to be one of the best in the country. Could have fooled me going against Georgia Tech. I looked at it more, well, you lose Verse, you lose a couple of other guys off of that defensive line. I didn't need week 0 to tell me that FSU should not be my pick in the ACC. And I'm not completely out on FSU. I still think that they are going to compete in the ACC. But the team that I feel like I was a year early on was Clemson. Last year, I really liked Clemson. Clay Klubnik is a little bit of a gunslinger. A little bit of the bad side of the gunslinger came out last year. I think he'll be a little bit more refined in his game this year. But I'm curious how Clemson matches up with Georgia. Probably my favorite game of the weekend that does not include Colorado State or Air Force? Notre Dame, Texas A&M. I know the stakes are high for CU because of the perception and because of what has happened over the last week or two. But the Texas A&M Notre Dame game has college football playoff ramifications to it. And it's interesting with the college football playoff in place, Florida State's not dead. Right? They'd be just about dead losing to Georgia Tech 1 year ago. Now they're not. Still, I think their margin for error is like 0. But it's not all over for Florida State. If you're a Power 4 team, if you have some brand recognition, if you have some star power, and you rack up the wins, one is not going to doom you. But for Notre Dame, part of that with Florida State is, look, they could still win their conference. Right? They could still trump Clemson. I don't think they will, but they have that opportunity in front of them. With Notre Dame, it is really tricky. And I know that the voters will bend over backwards to try and get Notre Dame into the college football playoff. But if they lose to Texas A&M, there aren't a ton of other great wins potentially on Notre Dame's schedule. And you're getting Texas A&M with Mike Elko in his first game. The storylines of that game, too. It's not just that these are two really good football teams and it carries some weight for Notre Dame. But you have Mike Elko, who coached at Duke, and he coached Riley Leonard, who is now the quarterback at Notre Dame. Only through the transfer portal could something like this, an NIL, happen. So Texas A&M Notre Dame's got to be my favorite non-Colorado matchup of the weekend, but Georgia Clemson's going to be fun. Penn State, West Virginia. Quite a few good week 1 games. And we're moving in this direction. Say what you will about the impact on non-revenue generating sports and the group of 5, and I get all that, and those are legitimate gripes, and I'm not trying to diminish them. But if you just look at college football through the lens of what makes that the best product, we are moving in a direction where it will be the best product it has ever been. Expanded playoff, some of the matchups that we are going to get now. Not just early in the season, but some of these conference matchups. Oregon, Ohio State. That's going to be biggest game of the year. But that's how they made this decision, right? They made this decision based on what was good for college football. And this is good for college football. Maybe not good for anybody else. You want to know a great encapsulation of how far Caitlin Clark has come in her rookie year? Last night would be a great example. It's the perfect example, really. And I told you that Caitlin Clark was going to come out of this Olympic break and she was going to be locked in on another level and play on another level. Last night, she broke the single season WNBA record with 3-pointers. But it's more about her impact on winning that stuck out to me. Part of why I said it was tough to judge Indiana early and why is because the league did them very few favors by making the schedule the way that they did. They played way more games than everybody else, and they were matched up against the best teams in the WNBA every single night. That's not an easy spot for Caitlin Clark to get into. And to her credit, she performed very well. But that was also part of my calculation that after the Olympic break, we would really see Caitlin Clark in the Indiana Fever flourish. One of the teams they kept playing, it felt like every other night, Indiana was playing Connecticut. Connecticut's not one of these super teams like the Liberty or the Aces, but they're just a very well put together, strong team. And going against a very young Indiana team, Indiana was just no match. And now last night, those two teams meet again, and Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever beat Connecticut. You see the growth, the improvement, while she's still breaking every record that is a single season this, a single season that, a rookie this, a rookie that. So if you didn't tune back into Caitlin Clark after the Olympic break, you may want to. She's playing at a different level, and Indiana's winning games. Want to get a quick word in for QC Kinetics. Great supporters of this show, me, what we do here. If you're dealing with pain from arthritis, you know that it keeps you from doing a lot of the things that you love to do. But maybe the traditional ways of treating it, the ways you've been told, the old ways, really, traditional, old. Let's just call it for what it is, the old ways. Surgery, pain pills, steroids. Maybe they don't work for you. Maybe you're a little hesitant because of some of the effects, and I would understand that. QC Kinetics is offering exciting new cellular therapies that can get you lasting relief. They use cutting-edge treatments that accelerate your own body's healing properties, revitalizing your joints so you can move again. If you're living with chronic pain from arthritis or injury, you need to know that those old ways, they're not the only ways anymore. And the way QC Kinetics does things, what they do, no downtime associated with it. Let the local medical professionals at QC Kinetics help you get your life back with regenerative, restorative, cellular treatments for your achy joints. At least, at bare minimum, it's worth a free consultation, right? 719-347-1988. That's 719-347-1988. Off Research Parkway on Chapel Hills Drive and with locations in Aurora, Superior, and Highlands Ranch. I got to jet up to Air Force, and I will be bringing you Air Force and Army with a cast of thousands on the broadcast, ESPN Plus, if you are so inclined. I will, if I don't talk to you that way, I will certainly talk to you tomorrow at 3. And yeah, the Buffs and Bison will be leading the show one way or another. Talk to you tomorrow.